expectation that isn't met, we respond emotionally. And usually that emotional response that happens inside of us is anger. We're mad. I didn't get my way. I didn't get what I wanted. That's usually the response. Sometimes it might be hurt or disappointment. But when we feel that anger, we can stop and ask ourselves two questions. Am I angry about the right thing or the right reasons? And then, am I angry in the right way? Because we're never more vulnerable to sin than when that anger is really, really high. And I remember feeling that anger in our marriage really, really early on. Actually, it happened to be the first week of marriage. the first Friday night, we'd been married, the honeymoon's over, we moved to LA where Peter was in graduate school and I was a teacher. It's our first Friday, and I'm driving home from work, and I'm thinking, he has the day off. I bet he spent the whole day thinking about me. He has thought about a lovely meal that he could prepare. He's gone grocery shopping. He's probably set out our new dishes on the table and flowers, and maybe even a bottle of wine chilling.
I'm sure you can.
Yeah. So you can imagine. I got home, and so here's my expectations. The reality was, on the kitchen table is a note that says, golfing with Clint.
Every guy in the room is sweaty palms.
So I'm angry. I'm thinking, what world did I get myself into? Who is this guy I married? He was so romantic before. I hear that the romance dies, but here we are, week one, and we're already golfing with Clint. But I realized pretty quickly, when I stopped to say, am I angry about the right reasons? I realized, I'm not. He had no idea that I had come up with this, fantasy in my mind. And good for Peter that golf is a really long sport. Because 2 hours later, and I looked at him and I said, it is a good thing you came home when you did now, because 2 hours ago you were in a lot of trouble. So the first thing is that we just have that trigger inside of us that says, hey, I need some forgiveness here. I need to think about, something's not right. I've got that emotional trigger. The second thing is that we want to be people who forgive daily. If you want an environment where misunderstandings and mistakes, not only are they accepted, but they're expected. Because we're a group of sinners living together, we need to be people who are readily forgiving every day, daily, and often. And the reason is, you maybe have heard, don't let the anger go down, or the sun go down on your anger. And the reason is, anger is never buried dead. It's always buried alive. We think, whatever, I'm not angry anymore, whatever. But it seeps out. It's going to seep out either bitterness or resentment. Even sarcasm can be kind of a thinly veiled anger. So really you want to let that anger out every day. It's toxic inside of us. The third thing about when we forgive is to know that we want to forgive readily. Think about when you ask God, you come to Him in confession, how do you want Him to respond to you when you say, God, forgive me, I didn't mean to do this? You're not hoping that He's going to say, well, let me sulk for a few days and hold this over you and make you feel really bad and grovel. No, He forgives readily, without condition. There's no timeline. So we want that to create an environment of grace and forgiveness in our homes.
Can we make this less about preaching and more about meddling in your life? Can you think of somebody right now that you have a broken relationship with, or that you're angry at, or who is angry at you? Maybe God can use this to talk to you about that relationship and what forgiveness really looks like. And I say what forgiveness really looks like because it seemed to me when Heather was talking about you need to forgive, there's a lot of things that I do that I call forgiveness that are not really forgiveness. We need to figure out what forgiveness is not before we figure out what it is. So I asked her, what are some of the myths about forgiveness?
There's some misconceptions out there about what forgiveness really is. The first one is that forgiveness is not easy. It's not even natural, really. We want justice. We want to get revenge. We want to get our own way when something has happened that we didn't want to happen to us. But yet we come and we are forgiven by the Lord. And so we need, just like in the spiritual disciplines where we have our part, we're going to talk about what's our part and our steps, we need God working in us in order to be able to forgive. extent that we have experienced love. And the same is true with forgiveness. If you're a real prideful person and kind of see yourself as pretty perfect, then you're not really usually as readily giving out forgiveness to others or showing forgiveness to others. The second thing that forgiveness is that it's not weak. It's not that you're a doormat if you're a person who forgives. In fact, it takes a lot of strength and a lot of power to be a person of forgiveness. To say, I am going to be humble and I'm going to be compassionate. It takes strength and power. It doesn't mean that you're going to not have boundaries and you're not going to set up some parameters maybe in that relationship, but it does mean that it takes power and strength. The third misconception I would say is forgiveness is not always reconciliation. It's true, our goal is to have a restored relationship, but it's not going to be the same. After forgiveness has taken place, that relationship is always going to be different than it was before. It may be, like, think about maybe with a team where that relationship now has an opportunity to rebuild trust. Or it may be that there's a new boundary set in place so that you don't get hurt again. I've had couples who come and they talk about once they've worked through forgiveness in maybe a major area in their marriage and in their relationship, and they confess, this is my part and this is your part, and they've listened and they've loved through that process, that they're actually in a deeper, more intimate spot than they were before they worked through that forgiveness. So your relationship is going to be different. And the last one that I want to talk about is that forgiveness is not a one-time deal. You may think, I forgave that person, done, check it off. And you see that person again, and you feel that hurt again, you feel that anger, and you may have to kind of go through that process of forgiveness over and over again with that same person. Or maybe even that, you forgave him yesterday for the wet towel on the floor, and then today the wet towel's on the floor again. So forgiveness is not contingent upon that person not repeating that behavior or contingent upon that person changing. It's really a choice, especially in those relationships, like you said, maybe with difficult people. So maybe if you can think about maybe a difficult person in your life, maybe it's a parent or a sibling, might even be a child or an in-law, a neighbor, a colleague, whoever that person is, that you're going to see over and over again. It's a choice to forgive every day. And I think about a client that I had really in my practicum. And she came to me, I'll call her Sarah. She wanted to really work through forgiveness with her mom. She wanted a restored relationship with her. And her mom was not interested in participating in this. Her mom was not interested in changing at all. But Sarah knew, she grew up just feeling like love was always contingent in her home on her behavior. She had to be perfect. She didn't have that home where that grace was prevalent. And she decided, worked through, I'm going to accept my mom for who she is, love her for who she is. I know she's doing the best she can with what she's got. I want to honor her. I want to respect her. I want to forgive her. And in order to stay in a relationship with her, I'm going to have to choose to forgive her over and over again in order to have that relationship.
So forgiveness, whatever it is, doesn't work in the sense that it automatically changes the other person. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work just once, and it's done. But the Bible thinks this is so important that in the passage we read, it's repeated over and over. Bear with one another if one has offended you. If anybody has hurt you, forgive them. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. It's rooted in the nature of God relationships. That gives us the idea of a definition. I shared this with Heather that for me, forgiveness has become a decision. Forgiveness is a decision to set aside past grievances, to wipe the slate clean.